Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Sports Minority Report. And this week we're going to be talking about uh, the AAC. And I promised you that we would discuss why the AAC is precarious and why they may want to pick up the phone and talk to the Mountain West Commissioner, maybe get on a conference call with Air Force. So let's go ahead and get started on this. I think the loss, the completion of the Pac-12 is something that threatens to destabilize the AAC. Memphis, I think, it greases the skids for them to get out of the AAC, and I'm going to cover a little bit of stuff that I talked about last time, and then get into some new material. Um, Memphis fans hate the AAC, specifically in basketball. They look over at the new pack and they recognize it's better in basketball, it's better in football. Memphis wants to move conferences, but Memphis really is angling long term to get into the P4. They want to get into the ACC or the Big 12. Um, it doesn't look like either one of those opportunities is a given, which is a shame because Memphis legitimately deserves to be in the Power Four. They have the best support, and their programs and their facilities are evolving into facilities that truly belong in the Big 12, probably in the Big 12. Anyway, but the Big 12 seems like they're pretty solid right now. Their membership doesn't it's not going anywhere, and they look like they're years away from having an opportunity to expand. They may have to wait for unrest in the ACC before their media partners rubber stamp expansion. And even when that occurs, no guarantee that Memphis is at the top of their list, is one of the top four. They may be number five, and that's really disappointing, but that's reality. Um, the ACC, on the other hand, looks a lot more unstable. Um, it looks like at some point in the near future, they might lose a few schools. But Notre Dame also recently stepped up and dropped hints that they would be more or less championing the ACC and holding it all together. They said that they could lose schools and they would be fine with that. They could maintain it, or they may rebuild with new schools. If they rebuild with new schools, they made a specific point to say similarly minded schools. Well, that's something you got to pay attention to. No, that's Notre Dame and Stanford and all of those, Duke, all of those highfalutin academic schools saying, Memphis, we're probably not looking for you, and that's brutal, brutal for Memphis. They're saying, USF, Tulane, yeah, those are AAU schools. We could really look at those, but Memphis is not an AAU school. They're not similar minded, and Memphis has clearly taken the hint. Memphis had been very dissatisfied with the Pac over the initial offer that the Pac made to them. Um, Memphis had sort of looked at it like that was an insult. Now, their stances towards the Pac since then have become significantly warmer since that leak of what Notre Dame thinks about the AAC and the future. Over that time, Memphis has also seen a new suitor arise for their Olympic sports, the Big East Conference. Now, the Big East Conference is a game changer. Um, Memphis's big problem is they don't want to be a regional outlier in the Pac, and the Pac has never addressed this. So Memphis is totally out on moving all of their sports to the Pac. However, if they can put their basketball into the Big East, that is a much more profitable home for their Olympic sports than either the AAC or the Pac. They just needed somewhere to put their football home. Now, that was tough with the Pac playing hardball with Texas State, and not wanting to look at New Mexico State. Memphis was sitting here scratching their head going, wow, is the Pac going to let their 2-year grace cycle, grace period from the NCAA expire to get back up to 8 full all sports members? Memphis was kind of probably worried about that. I think that they likely expressed new interest in the Pac and suggested maybe we could be a football only program in your conference. And I think that's what ultimately inspired the Pac to make a little sweeter deal to Texas State and get that done and get the conference back into an official conference and restore their standing. You have to understand that the leadership of the Pac, the two Pac, Oregon State and Washington State, are at their core football myopic schools. When Memphis says, we'll play football in your conference, they say yes, that they want that. They'll take that if they can't get Memphis all sports. Now, is that a dumb position to take? Yes, absolutely. When you could consider that Memphis might get passed over again by the Power Four in the next round of realignment, you could have Memphis in your conference forever in all sports. But that's not the two Pac's position, apparently. And that works for Memphis. Memphis wants to be in the Big East. Now, the two Pac can look at it and they can say, well, it's not our ideal position, but at least we get Memphis out of the AAC, and that makes the AAC worse and us look better, and therefore it increases the gap between the two conferences. That's legitimate. I wish that wasn't their thinking, but that's apparently what they're looking at. And you can see this via all of the leaks that have come out about Memphis over the last 3-4 months. I mean, they're looking at the Big East, and because I think they realize that there's a distinct possibility they might get frozen out of the P4 again. And they also realize that their fans absolutely hate the AAC for basketball right now. So now you've had the Pac do what they needed to do to become a conference, and Memphis is ready to leave. So now you start thinking about, well, what is the AAC without Memphis? What is the AAC with Tulane and USF looking longingly at the ACC and thinking, hey, we could get over there, They kind of got their bags packed and ready to head out the door. It's not inconceivable that if the ACC loses 2 schools that they immediately add Tulane and USF. So what does that leave you with in the AAC? Now the AAC's got some problems. They've got an upcoming media look-in window. Now that's basically, if you don't know what that means that in their TV contract there is an opportunity for the media partners to look at the numbers and say, we're paying them appropriately, or we're overpaying them and we need to reduce our numbers. Now, there are about 4 or 5 schools in the AAC that are pretty much non-competitive in football or basketball, and that's a real problem because their numbers are all down. They're not, in essence, they're not pulling their weight in terms of perception. And that's a problem for the AAC. When the window comes up, if Memphis is gone, if Tulane is either looking to get out the door with USF or they're both gone, the AAC is screwed. And if those numbers drop, everything that they built is rickety. They've been trying to follow Mike Oresco's vision of 2 things, 3 things really. Having the best non-P4 conference, which they have for up until the Pac completed their deal with Texas State. And certainly right now, arguably, they're still there. But the best non P4 conference, a national footprint that stretches across several time zones, specifically the Eastern and Central, and then a putting together all three military academies. Now they haven't been able to hit Oresco's goal of putting together the Air Force with Army and Navy, but they did land Army and Navy for football only memberships. Now, if they can get Air Force, that changes things. That changes their perspective. The three military academies together can bring an impressive viewership to any conference, and that's what the AAC I think should be looking at. They should be thinking about contacting the Mountain West Commissioner, Gloria Navarez, and having a discussion with her and the Air Force Academy. Now, I'm going to need to roll back a little bit to make it clear why this would be a sensible approach to take. Over the years, the AAC has looked to add the Air Force Academy. The Air Force Academy has wanted to go to the AAC, but the Air Force Academy was trying to play the PR game. They didn't want to be the school that torches their conference on the way out. So they stayed loyal to the Mountain West Conference. Now, they were almost out the door with Colorado State a couple years back, and then Colorado State at the last minute kind of got browbeaten by Boise State and some of the other schools, and Colorado State said, "Oh, we're not going." And then the Air Force Academy was like, "Damn it, we can't get out the door." The Air Force Academy did not want to leave in a way where they could be perceived as damaging the conference. Well, Colorado State bailed on the conference now and left Air Force Academy sitting there in the dust. Air Force Academy was likely thinking, this is our opportunity, let's get out of here. And then Gloria Navarez came to them and said, "Hey, look, we just paid $20 million or contracted to pay $20 million to UNLV. We'd like to pay you guys I think it was like $17 million for you guys to stay, and then we're going to pay everyone else in the conference slightly less to stay out of the money that we made playing the 2-pack in football the last couple of years, and that their poaching agreements with the 2-pack and the exit fees from the schools that left for the pack." Well, the Air Force Academy was like, "Well, I don't think the money really mattered to them, but I think there was a perception, again, that if they had bailed on the Mountain West Conference right then, they would look like the villains. So they basically took a little more money and stayed. Now, my suspicion, and I have nothing at all to prove this on, is that they really probably extracted permission for Navarez to bail on the conference within the next 5 years. To basically, I shouldn't say within the next 5 years, to complete the next media contract and then be free to bail on the conference when the conference is more stable. That would be the smart play to do if you had those goals, which I think they do, to get out of the conference with a get out of jail free card. Now, if that is Air Force's position right now, which I think it is, what's going on in the Mountain West Conference might be generating another get out of jail free card. There is a lot to admire about how Gloria Navarez has handled this assault on her conference. She basically predicted it. She put agreements in place that generated a ton of money, and then she bribed all of her members to stay. And that is exactly kind of how you need to manage this kind of situation. She did it textbook right, except for one thing, and that is that she has both poaching fees and exit fees. Now, what this means is that they're charging the 2-pack, Oregon State and Washington State, for poaching, for taking a school like Boise State, but then they're turning around and also charging Boise State an exit fee. Now, while you got to love that as somebody who is a fan of the Mountain West Conference, it is legally questionable because you are in essence charging someone twice. Now, everything that they've built, their entire plan was built on protecting these, was built on getting this money to save their conference. Now, if this whole thing has gone into arbitration because the Mountain West Conference doesn't have as much time as the Pac, so they're sort of forced into the situation where they have to pay these schools in order for them to stay. So they're working very hard to get this thing resolved. Now they put this thing through arbitration, and the trouble again is that the arbiter is likely a former judge or something, and he's probably going to look at this thing and say that yeah, at bare minimum, those numbers are going to get reduced. That they're not going to get the numbers that they want. Now, what happens if the Mountain West Conference goes through arbitration with the Pac, and the arbiter says, okay, Mountain West Conference, you don't get as much money as you want. You get 40%, 60%, whatever. There's probably a number that kills the conference, and I'm sure the arbiter is going to ensure that number is not hit, because clearly the Pac is in the wrong for the most part on this. But it doesn't change the legal precedents. They don't normally allow you to charge someone twice for the same thing. And that's the problem. That's the rub. I think there's a very, very likely case that what's going to happen is that the arbiter is going to assign a certain value to it. It's going to come back to the Mountain West Conference, and they're going to look at it and they're going to say, holy crap, we cannot afford either Air Force or UNLV, and what are we going to do? Now, I think if you were to take a vote of the member schools of the Mountain West Conference, they would say, let UNLV go. They would say, don't honor that contract, pay Air Force, and then split the rest of the money up with us. Now, that is, why do I say that? I say that because there have been comments from almost every school in the Mountain West Conference, just chatter, rumors really, that they are unhappy with how much money UNLV has sunk into their facilities. There is a feeling that UNLV is essentially a Big 12 school now in terms of facilities. I mean, they're not a Big 12 school in terms of money. They're $20 million in debt, which is why the Navarrez offer to bribe them for $20 million kept them. But all of the other Mountain West Conference schools are sniping about, God, I don't want to go play them because they're going to curb stomp us. It's like, you've got a conference of peers, and then there's UNLV that's basically a Big 12 school. That's generally the perception. So I think that if you put it up to a vote, I think you would likely see them, the Mountain West Conference schools saying, yeah, don't honor the UNLV contract. Let them go to the Pac, and we'll go on our way. The trouble with this is that UNLV is in Las Vegas, and right now Las Vegas is a red hot media market for sports. That is the most valuable asset that they have media wise. Now, I have this perception that Gloria Navarrez, maybe I think she's a better commissioner than she actually is, but I think this is dead on. I believe that she went to her media partners and said, hey, look, if we want to keep our media shares the same, what do we need to do if we lose X number of schools to the 2-pack? I think she had this conversation with them ahead of time. And they said, you need to add specifically Grand Canyon University. You probably need to expand into the central time zone, probably into like northern Illinois and Toledo. And we'll expand you out east. And maybe then we can continue to match your money even if the quality of your programs declines. That's exactly what she's done. I think she's followed their pathway to basically guaranteeing the same money. Now, I use that term guaranteeing the same money because there's this talk out there that Navarez guaranteed her membership that they would get the same media money. They were making about $3.5 million, and I think that that's what they're on target to make. Now, the problem with this is that they're on target to make this with Air Force Academy, which you can't really leverage that well in the Mountain West, and UNLV, which you can leverage in the Mountain West. So the media partners are going to want them to keep UNLV. They're going to be more accepting, I think, of Air Force going. Now that's where Air Force could walk out of this conference today. Like, you could sit down and the AAC, Air Force, and Navarez could reach an agreement. And that's the Mountain West Conference lets Air Force out of their contract. Air Force walks out the door with the Mountain West Conference says, this is only because we didn't have the money to pay them, blah blah blah, fucking Pac. They give this narrative where the Air Force can walk out without any sort of PR backlash, and the Air Force can get into the conference they've wanted to get into forever, which is the AAC. Now, the Olympic sports in the Mountain West Conference aren't any good anyway. So Air Force could continue to play their Olympic sports in the Mountain West Conference, and that could be part of the agreement. That would make a lot of sense for all the parties. Air Force doesn't take any of the money out of the big financial windfall because Air Force doesn't need any of that money. Air Force is a government institution. They can get all the money they need out of the government. So, that pushes them into the AAC. That gives you the three military academies working together. I shouldn't say working together. It's the three military academies' fan bases all rooting for the same conference. That is the deal. You fully activate those fan bases in service to the AAC. So that's going to pump up your media numbers. It's going to make the AAC look a lot stronger when that window of evaluation comes up. So that's my idea. Now, is that going to save everything with the AAC? No, man. They got symptomatic problems throughout. The AAC is, I think, in trouble. But this would be a great first step. This would give them an opportunity not to implode, which I think they're right now that would be a step ahead of where they are right now. I think they're on the fast track for implosion right now. And when I say implosion, I mean that they have systematically, if you look at it, they've got many of the exact same problems that Conference USA had right before Conference USA imploded. So, that's my 2 cents. If the AAC wants me as an advisor, feel free to give me a buzz because I can help you save that conference. But that thing is a smoking mess right now, man. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and if you like what I had to say, go ahead and subscribe. If you think other people should hear what I have to say, give it a thumbs up, and the great YouTube machine will go ahead and recommend it to other viewers. You guys have a great day, and thanks for listening to the Sports Minority Report.